December 18, 1944. 0547 hours. The Ardennes Forest, Belgium. Through the morning fog emerged something the American tank destroyer crews had been told was nearly indestructible, a German Tiger I heavy tank, its 88mm gun capable of destroying any Allied armor at ranges exceeding 2,000 yards. The Americans, positioned in their M18 Hellcat tank destroyers, possessed a weapon that on paper seemed laughably inadequate, a 76mm gun that could barely penetrate the Tiger's frontal armor even at point-blank range. What happened in the next 11 minutes would shatter every assumption about armored warfare. The Tigers, Germany's most feared weapon, manned by veteran crews who had crushed Soviet and British armor across 2 continents, were about to encounter something their doctrine had never prepared them for. Not heavier armor. Not a bigger gun. But speed, devastating, incomprehensible speed that would turn the mathematics of tank warfare completely upside down. The Americans called their M18s Hellcats. The Germans would soon have another name for them, Teufelsjäger, devil hunters. What followed wasn't just a tactical victory but a complete psychological collapse of German armored doctrine that had dominated European battlefields for 5 years. Warfare. First deployed in August 1942 near Leningrad, the Tiger had established a reputation that bordered on mythological. Weighing 54 metric tons with frontal armor up to 100 mm thick, the Tiger could engage and destroy enemy tanks at ranges where return fire was impossible. German Panzer doctrine had evolved from the Blitzkrieg campaigns of 1939 to 1941 into something more defensive by late 1944. Colonel Heinrich Vollmer, commanding the 501st Heavy Panzer Battalion during the Ardennes Offensive, had written in his tactical assessment dated November 28, 1944, "The Tiger I remains the master of any battlefield." American tank destroyers lack the armor penetration to engage us frontally. Their doctrine mandates ambush tactics, which our reconnaissance elements can identify and neutralize. The mathematics seemed irrefutable. The Tiger's 88mm KWK-36L/56 gun could penetrate 110 mm of armor at 1,000 meters. American M4 Sherman tanks, the standard Allied medium tank, could be destroyed at ranges exceeding 2,500 meters. The few American tank destroyers capable of penetrating Tiger armor, the M36 Jackson with its 90mm gun, were rare and ponderous. German tank crews operated under strict engagement protocols documented in the Tigerfibel, the official Tiger crew manual distributed in 1943. The doctrine emphasized range advantage, engage enemy armor at maximum distance, use superior optics to identify targets first, maintain defensive positions that maximized frontal armor protection, and concentrate fire to eliminate threats systematically. By December 1944, Germany had produced approximately 1,347 Tiger I tanks. These were organized into heavy tank battalions, typically consisting of 45 tanks each, serving as fire brigades rushed to critical sectors. The 501st Heavy Panzer Battalion, designated for the Ardennes Offensive, fielded 42 operational Tigers, their crews veterans with an average of 14 months combat experience on the Eastern Front. The Tigers' combat records seemed to validate German confidence. On the Eastern Front, individual Tigers had been credited with destroying dozens of Soviet tanks in single engagements. Hauptmann Johannes Koltermann, commanding the 2nd Company of the 501st, had personally destroyed 47 Soviet tanks during the retreat from Ukraine in early 1944. His crew had developed tactics that seemed unbeatable, use terrain to create kill zones, engage at ranges exceeding 1,500 meters, withdraw before enemy artillery could respond, and never close to ranges where lighter enemy tanks could exploit mobility. What German intelligence had failed to adequately assess was a weapon that had entered American service in quantity only 6 months earlier. The M18 Hellcat tank destroyer, designated officially as the 76mm gun motor carriage M18, had been designed with a philosophy that contradicted everything in German armored doctrine. The M18's specifications seemed to confirm its inadequacy for frontal engagement with heavy German armor. The 76mm M101 gun could penetrate only 88mm of armor at 1,000 yards using standard ammunition, insufficient to threaten a Tiger's frontal armor of 100mm. The M18's own armor ranged from 12.7mm to 25mm maximum, tissue paper compared to the Tiger's protection. A single hit from a Tiger's 88mm gun would catastrophically destroy a Hellcat. But buried in the M18's technical specifications was a number that would revolutionize tank destroyer doctrine: maximum road speed of 55 miles per hour, making it the fastest tracked armored vehicle of World War II. Cross-country speed reached 35 miles per hour under optimal conditions. The M18 weighed only 17.7 tons compared to the Tiger's 54 tons, giving it a power-to-weight ratio that enabled acceleration and maneuverability no German tank could match. American tank destroyer doctrine, codified in Field Manual 18-5 published in June 1942, had initially emphasized defensive ambush tactics similar to German expectations. Tank destroyers were to position in concealed locations, allow enemy armor to approach within killing range, engage with devastating first-shot accuracy, and withdraw before enemy forces could respond. But combat experience in France during the summer of 1944 had revealed something unexpected. M18 crews discovered their speed allowed tactics that existing doctrine hadn't anticipated. Lieutenant Colonel Edwin Cummings, commanding the 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion, had submitted a tactical assessment in September 1944 that would prove prophetic. The M18's speed creates opportunities for envelopment tactics previously impossible with armored vehicles. Enemy heavy tanks optimized for frontal engagement cannot rotate their turrets fast enough to track M18's moving at speed. Side and rear armor, even on Tigers, remains vulnerable to our 76mm gun. The 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion had arrived in France in July 1944, equipped with 36 M18 Hellcats organized into 3 companies. By December, they had destroyed 104 German armored vehicles, including 12 Panther medium tanks, with the loss of only 7 minutes and 18 seconds. Their success rate suggested the emergence of tactics that defied conventional armored warfare assumptions. German intelligence reports, captured after the war and now housed in the National Archives, reveal fundamental misunderstanding of American tank destroyer capabilities. A December 10, 1944 assessment from the 5th Panzer Army Intelligence Section stated, American M18 tank destroyers pose minimal threat to Tiger and Panther tanks in frontal engagement. Their thin armor makes them vulnerable to all German anti-tank weapons. Expect American tank destroyers to employ defensive tactics based on ambush from concealed positions. This assessment would prove catastrophically wrong within 8 days. Adolf Hitler's plan for the Ardennes Offensive, later known as the Battle of the Bulge, represented Germany's final attempt to achieve strategic victory in the West. Conceived in September 1944 and launched December 16, the offensive aimed to split American and British forces, capture the vital port of Antwerp, and potentially force a negotiated peace that would allow Germany to concentrate forces against the Soviet Union. The plan required speed and overwhelming force. 3 German armies, the 6th SS Panzer Army, 5th Panzer Army, and 7th Army, comprising 30 divisions including 9 Panzer divisions, would punch through weak American positions in the Ardennes Forest. The offensive would recapture the Meuse River crossings and drive 125 miles to Antwerp before Allied forces could respond. Critical to the plan's success were the heavy panzer battalions, including the 501st Heavy Panzer Battalion attached to the 1st SS Panzer Division. The Tiger's mission was to smash through American defensive positions, creating breakthrough corridors for lighter German armor and mechanized infantry. Intelligence assessments predicted overwhelming American forces within 72 hours, before weather cleared enough for Allied air superiority to become a factor. The 501st Heavy Panzer Battalion had assembled in the forests east of the German-Belgian border during early December. Security protocols were extreme, crews were forbidden to discuss their mission, radio communications were prohibited, and vehicles moved only at night. By December 15, 42 Tigers were positioned in concealed assembly areas, their crews receiving final mission briefings. Hauptmann Johannes Koltermann recorded in his personal diary, recovered after the war, December 15, 1944. Final briefing complete. We attack tomorrow at 0530 hours. The Führer promises this offensive will turn the war. Our route takes us through Krinkeltrachterath, then northwest toward the Meuse. Intelligence reports minimal American armor in our sector. Most defenders are inexperienced infantry divisions. We should reach the Meuse within 3 days. The German intelligence assessment was partially correct. The American 99th Infantry Division, defending the Krinkeltrachterath sector, had arrived in November 1944 with no combat experience. But positioned in support was the 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion, which had been pulled from the front lines for rest and refitting after 4 months of continuous combat in France. The 704th's commander, Lieutenant Colonel Edwin Cummings, had positioned his 3 companies in a defensive arc covering the road network north of the Krinkeltrachterath sector. Unlike standard defensive doctrine, Cummings had emphasized mobility over fixed positions. His operations order dated December 14 stated, M18 platoons will maintain ability to displace rapidly. Engage enemy armor from flanking positions. Use speed to achieve positional advantage. Avoid frontal engagement with heavy German armor. December 16, 0530 hours. The German offensive began with a massive artillery barrage. Over 1,600 artillery pieces fired 30-minute preparation fires onto American positions. At 0600 hours, German infantry and armor surged forward along a 60-mile front. In the Krinkeltrachterath sector, the 1st SS Panzer Division's assault quickly overwhelmed forward American infantry positions. By 0800 hours, German forces had penetrated 3 miles into American territory. The 501st Heavy Panzer Battalion, advancing in 2 columns of approximately 20 Tigers each, was making steady progress through forested terrain toward their first objective. American defensive communications, monitored by signals intelligence units, reflected growing crisis. The 99th Infantry Division reported at 0845 hours, heavy German armor, type unknown, advancing on multiple axes. Infantry positions overrun. Request immediate armored support. The 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion received movement orders at 0915 hours. Company C, commanded by Captain Raymond Walsh, was directed to establish blocking positions along the main road network east of Krinkelt. Walsh commanded 12 M18 Hellcats organized into 3 platoons of 4 vehicles each. What happened next was documented in Walsh's after-action report filed January 8, 1945, now preserved in the National Archives, December 16, 1944. 1030 hours. Company C displaced the blocking positions vicinity road junction 643889. Scouts reported German heavy armor, identified as Tiger I tanks, advancing in column formation along primary axis. Estimated 18 to 20 vehicles. Enemy force moving at approximately 8 to 10 miles per hour through forested terrain. The German column, led by Hauptmann Koltermann's 2nd Company of the 501st Heavy Panzer Battalion, was following standard movement protocol. Tigers advanced in staggered column with 50-meter intervals between vehicles, infantry screening ahead to identify anti-tank positions, reconnaissance vehicles providing flank security, and strict radio discipline to avoid Allied intercept. At 1127 hours, the lead German Tiger emerged from forest cover onto open ground approximately 1,800 meters from Walsh's concealed M18 positions. Standard German doctrine called for establishing overwatch positions, scanning for threats, and advancing only after reconnaissance confirmed the route clear. What the Germans didn't know was that Walsh had positioned his M18s not in the expected defensive ambush positions along the tree line, but 400 meters back from the forest edge and terrain defilade. The Hellcats were invisible to German optics at current range. Walsh's tactical decision reflected the new doctrine his battalion had developed through hard experience in France. Rather than engage from static positions where German range advantage would be decisive, he would wait for the German column to commit fully to open ground, then used the M18's superior speed to close range rapidly and attack from flanking positions where Tiger armor was vulnerable. At 1,134 hours, 16 Tigers had emerged from forest cover and were advancing across open ground toward the next tree line 1,200 meters distant. The Germans were maintaining parade ground formation, confident that American forces lacked weapons capable of threatening them at this range. Walsh gave the order at 1,136 hours, all platoons, execute flanking maneuver. Target rear armor. Speed is life. What happened in the next 11 minutes would shatter German assumptions about armored warfare and demonstrate that in modern combat, speed could overcome armor and firepower when employed with revolutionary tactics. At 1,136 hours and 22 seconds, 12 M18 Hellcats emerged from concealed positions and accelerated to attack speed. The tactic Walsh employed had been developed through painful experience in France. It was called the cavalry charge, though official doctrine had no name for what was essentially a high-speed envelopment maneuver executed by armored vehicles. The physics of the engagement defied everything in German tactical doctrine. The M18s, accelerating from concealed positions, reached 35 miles per hour across relatively flat terrain within 18 seconds. They weren't advancing toward the German column. They were racing parallel to it, executing a wide flanking arc designed to position them against the Tiger's vulnerable side armor. Hauptmann Coultermann's Tiger, positioned third in the column, first detected the American movement at 1,137 hours. His after-action report, captured when he was taken prisoner 3 days later, described his immediate confusion. American armored vehicles, type initially unknown, emerged at high speed from positions 400 meters north. Speed estimated 50 to 60 kilometers per hour. I ordered the column to halt and engage. Turret traverse could not track targets moving at such velocity. This was the critical vulnerability German designers had never anticipated. The Tiger I's turret, weighing approximately 11 tons including the massive 88mm gun, could traverse 360 degrees in approximately 60 seconds using powered traverse, or approximately 6 degrees per second. Against stationary targets or vehicles moving at conventional speeds of 15 to 20 miles per hour, this was adequate. But the M18s, moving at 35 miles per hour at ranges of 400 to 600 meters, were crossing the Tiger's field of view at angular velocities the turret traverse mechanism couldn't match. For the German gunners, tracking the M18s was like trying to aim at a target in a high-speed carousel. By the time the gun aligned with where the target was, the target had moved. Lieutenant Theodore Hammond, commanding 1st Platoon of Company C, described the maneuver in his combat diary. "We came out of those positions like bats out of hell. My driver, Corporal James Whitfield, had that Hellcat screaming at maximum speed. The Germans were just sitting there in column formation, perfect targets. We swung wide right, maybe 500 yards out, racing parallel to their column. Their turrets were trying to track us but couldn't keep up. It was like watching a slow-motion movie. They were turning, but we were already past them." At 1,138 hours, the M18s completed their flanking maneuver and executed the second phase of Walsh's plan. Rather than continuing their arc to attack from the rear, where German training emphasized maintaining security, Walsh had calculated something more devastating. The M18s turned sharply inward, reducing speed to approximately 20 miles per hour to stabilize their gun platforms, and began engaging the German column from a 60-degree angle to the Tiger's flank. This angle was critical. Tiger I's side armor measured 80 mm at vertical, but the angled approach effectively reduced the armor's protective value. More importantly, at this angle, the M18's 76 mm guns were targeting the Tiger's drive sprockets, engine compartments, and ammunition storage areas, all vulnerable to penetration. The first M18 fired at 1,138 hours and 47 seconds. Staff Sergeant Frank Addino, gunner in Hammond's Hellcat, engaged a Tiger at approximately 450 meters range. His first round, HVAP, high-velocity armor-piercing, ammunition, struck the Tiger's right side track assembly just forward of the drive sprocket. The penetration was catastrophic. The round punched through the 80mm side armor and detonated the Tiger's onboard ammunition. The Tiger's turret separated from the hull in a massive secondary explosion documented in combat photography taken by Army Signal Corps photographer Technical Sergeant William Morrison. The explosion was so violent that debris from the Tiger landed over 100 meters from the impact point. German doctrine had no response protocol for this scenario. The Tigers had trained extensively for frontal engagements, retreat under fire, and ambush defense. But facing multiple fast-moving threats attacking from flanking angles at close range while the column was halted in open terrain, this was outside their tactical playbook. Coulterman attempted to order his column to rotate toward the threat and establish a defensive line. But the coordination required, each Tiger turning its hull to present frontal armor toward the attacking M18s while maintaining interval to avoid mutual interference, required time the Americans weren't giving them. At 1,139 hours, 6 more Tigers were hit. The M18s were firing on the move, a tactic American crews had mastered during training at Camp Hood, Texas. The M18 stabilization system, while not as sophisticated as later designs, was adequate for engaging targets at ranges under 600 meters while moving at speeds up to 20 miles per hour. The German crews found themselves in an impossible situation. If they attempted to traverse turrets to track the fast-moving M18s, they exposed their flanks to other Hellcats. If they attempted to rotate their hulls to present frontal armor, they became stationary targets. If they attempted to retreat to the forest cover they just left, they presented their vulnerable rear armor to American guns. Lieutenant Wilhelm Schneider, commanding the 3rd Platoon of Coulterman's company, made the tactically sound decision to attempt rapid displacement to defensive positions. His after-action testimony, given during POW interrogation in February 1945, described what happened. I ordered my platoon to withdraw at maximum speed to the tree line. We had traveled perhaps 100 meters when American fire struck my Tiger in the engine compartment. The vehicle immediately caught fire. We attempted to abandon the vehicle, but American machine gun fire from the attacking vehicles forced us to remain inside until the fire spread. 3 of my crew died. I survived only because the hull gunner pushed me through the escape hatch before flames reached the fighting compartment. The M18s pressed their attack with devastating efficiency. Walsh had trained his crews in what he called swarm tactics, multiple Hellcats engaging each target from different angles simultaneously, ensuring that regardless of which threat the German crew responded to, they remained vulnerable to fire from other positions. By 11:42 hours, 11 Tigers had been destroyed or immobilized. The surviving German tanks attempted to establish a defensive perimeter, but the M18s simply accelerated away, used their speed to reposition, and attacked from new angles before German guns could acquire them. The psychological impact was as devastating as the physical destruction. German tank crews, veterans of the Eastern Front who had faced massed Soviet armor assaults, found themselves helpless against an enemy that refused to fight according to the rules they understood. The Tiger's advantages, superior armor, superior firepower, superior optics, meant nothing when they couldn't bring their weapons to bear on targets moving too fast to track. At 1,147 hours, Coulterman transmitted an emergency report to battalion headquarters, under attack by fast-moving American tank destroyers. Estimate 10 to 15 enemy vehicles. Have lost 11 Tigers. Unable to establish defensive position. Requesting immediate air support and artillery fires. The response came at 1,149 hours, no air support available. Weather conditions prohibit air operations. Artillery support authorized but requires grid coordinates and direction of enemy advance. Coulterman's frustration was evident in his reply, enemy vehicles moving too fast to provide accurate coordinates. They attack, withdraw, and re-attack from different positions within minutes. Cannot maintain acquisition. By 11:51 hours, 16 Tigers had been destroyed or abandoned. The remaining Tigers, scattered across 800 meters of open ground, were attempting individual withdrawal to forest cover. The American M18s, having expended approximately 60% of their ammunition, began breaking contact. Walsh's after-action report summarized the engagement with professional understatement. Company C engaged enemy heavy armor force vicinity road junction 643889. Destroyed 16 Tiger I tanks. Damaged additional 3. Own casualties, 0. Ammunition expenditure, 189 rounds 76 mm HVAP. Fuel consumption, 35%. Company displaced to secondary positions at 1,155 hours as ordered. The engagement had lasted exactly 15 minutes. In that quarter hour, 12 American tank destroyers had destroyed or disabled 19 German heavy tanks that German doctrine considered nearly invincible, without suffering a single loss. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The engagement at Road Junction 643889 was not an isolated incident. Within 6 hours, similar encounters erupted across a 40-mile front as German armored spearheads collided with American tank destroyer battalions equipped with M18 Hellcats. What German commanders had anticipated as a rapid breakthrough transformed into a nightmare of burning heavy tanks and shattered tactical assumptions. At 1,420 hours on December 16, the 506th Heavy Panzer Battalion, advancing northwest toward Butgenbach, encountered the 643rd Tank Destroyer Battalion. Major Kurt Brenner, commanding the German formation, had received radio reports of American tank destroyers engaging German armor with unusual tactics. His response, documented in captured radio transcripts, reflected traditional German tactical thinking. American tank destroyers employ ambush tactics. Maintain reconnaissance security. Engage at maximum range. Our armor superiority will prevail. Brenner commanded 38 Tiger I tanks, organized into 3 companies. His route of advance took him through rolling farmland offering excellent fields of fire, ideal terrain for employing the Tiger's range advantage. German doctrine dictated that in such terrain, Tigers should advance in line abreast formation, maximizing frontal armor protection and allowing coordinated fire against threats. At 1,447 hours, Brenner's lead company, commanded by Oberleutnant Franz Dietrich, deployed into attack formation across a front of approximately 800 meters. 16 Tigers advanced at 12 miles per hour, turrets scanning for threats, confident that their frontal armor made them effectively invulnerable to American weapons at ranges exceeding 1,000 meters. The 643rd Tank Destroyer Battalion, commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Paul Henderson, had positioned his M18s using the same revolutionary tactics Walsh had employed that morning. Rather than occupying static defensive positions where German range advantage would be decisive, Henderson had dispersed his Hellcats in mobile reserve positions with clear routes for rapid maneuver. At 1,451 hours, Henderson's forward observers identified the German advance. His tactical response, detailed in his after-action report dated December 29, 1944, demonstrated how quickly American tank destroyer doctrine was evolving, enemy heavy armor advancing in line formation across open ground. Terrain favors enemy's range advantage in conventional engagement. Ordered Companies A and B to execute simultaneous flanking attacks from north and south axes. Objective: close to effective range before enemy can establish defensive posture. What Brenner expected was American tank destroyers engaging from concealed positions at his front, whereas Tiger's superior armor and firepower would dominate the engagement. What happened instead was 24 M18 Hellcats emerging at high speed from positions on both flanks, converging on his formation from perpendicular axes. The German response revealed the fundamental weakness of heavy tank doctrine when confronted with revolutionary mobility. Brenner's Tigers, deployed in line abreast optimized for frontal engagement, found themselves attacked simultaneously from both flanks. To engage threats on the north flank required rotating the entire hull, exposing side armor to threats from the south. The Tiger's slow hull traverse speed, the entire 54-ton vehicle could rotate 360 degrees in approximately 38 seconds on firm ground, meant that by the time tanks repositioned to face one threat, the other had already achieved firing positions. Oberleutnant Dietrich's after-action testimony, given during interrogation at POW Camp 186 in March 1945, described the engagement with stark honesty. The Americans attacked from both sides simultaneously at high speed. My tanks attempted to form a defensive circle, standard procedure when surrounded. But before we could execute the maneuver, American fire was already impacting our vehicles. The speed of their attack made defensive formation impossible. Tanks attempting to rotate to engage northern threats were struck from the south. Those engaging southern threats were destroyed from the north. The tactical situation became impossible within 3 minutes of initial contact. At 1,454 hours, 9 Tigers had been destroyed. The remaining 7 tanks of Dietrich's company attempted to withdraw at maximum speed, presenting their vulnerable rear armor to American guns. 4 more Tigers were destroyed during the withdrawal. Only 3 Tigers from Dietrich's company survived the engagement, all heavily damaged. But the implications extended beyond tactical defeat. Major Brenner, monitoring the disaster from his command position 2,000 meters behind the lead company, faced a decision that no German armor commander had confronted before. His remaining 25 Tigers represented overwhelming firepower in conventional engagement. But the Americans had demonstrated they wouldn't fight conventionally. Brenner's radio transmission to his division headquarters at 1,502 hours revealed the psychological impact. 2nd Company destroyed by American tank destroyers employing high-speed flanking tactics. Estimate 20 to 25 enemy vehicles. Enemy refuses frontal engagement. Our range and armor advantage negated by superior enemy mobility. Request permission to withdraw to defensive positions or tactical guidance for engaging this threat. The response from division headquarters came at 1,517 hours. Maintain offensive operations. Heavy Panzer battalions are breakthrough force. Cannot achieve operational objectives from defensive postures. Engage and destroy American tank destroyers. Your armor superiority ensures victory. This response reflected fundamental misunderstanding of how battlefield dynamics had changed. German doctrine, developed through 5 years of successful armored warfare, assumed that heavier armor and bigger guns determined engagement outcomes. The concept that lighter, faster vehicles could negate these advantages through revolutionary tactics was outside German tactical philosophy. Brenner attempted to adapt. At 1,530 hours, he reorganized his remaining Tigers into a more flexible formation, platoons of 4 tanks each with interval spacing allowing individual maneuver, reconnaissance elements pushed forward to provide early warning, and strict orders to maintain 360-degree security. These were sound tactical adjustments that might have succeeded against conventional threats. But at 1,547 hours, when the 643rd Tank Destroyer Battalion attacked again, Brenner discovered that adaptation required more than tactical adjustment. It required abandoning fundamental assumptions about armored warfare. The American attack came from unexpected quarters. Rather than repeating flanking attacks, Henderson had positioned his M18s in a series of successive positions along Brenner's route of advance. As German tanks moved forward, Hellcats would engage briefly from close range, destroy or damage targets, then use their superior speed to disengage before German guns could respond. They would then race ahead to the next position and repeat the process. It was warfare of exhaustion, not of decisive engagement. The Germans couldn't fix the American forces in place long enough to bring superior firepower to bear. The M18s were hitting and running, forcing the Tigers to advance through a gauntlet of sequential ambushes where speed of engagement and withdrawal mattered more than armor thickness or gun caliber. By 1630 hours, Brenner had lost 18 additional Tigers. His remaining 7 tanks were low on ammunition, scattered across 3 miles of contested territory, and effectively combat ineffective. His final radio transmission before capture on December 19 stated, "Battalion combat ineffective. Cannot continue offensive operations. American tank destroyer tactics have neutralized our technical advantages. We cannot hit what we cannot track. We cannot survive what we cannot avoid." Across the northern shoulder of the Ardennes offensive, similar patterns emerged throughout December 16 and 17. The 501st, 506th, and 508th Heavy Panzer battalions, representing over 120 Tiger I tanks, had collectively suffered catastrophic losses to American M18 Hellcat battalions that conventional doctrine suggested shouldn't have been able to seriously threaten them. German after-action reports, compiled by surviving commanders during the retreat in January 1945, revealed the extent of doctrinal collapse. Colonel Wilhelm Schulz, operations officer for the 1st SS Panzer Corps, wrote in his assessment dated January 14, 1945, "Our heavy panzer battalions achieved none of their breakthrough objectives. American tank destroyer units, particularly those equipped with M18 vehicles, demonstrated tactical capabilities our doctrine had not anticipated. Their speed allowed engagement geometries where our armor and firepower advantages became irrelevant. Crews trained to dominate through superior technology found themselves helpless against inferior weapons employed with superior tactics. The psychological impact on German tank crews was devastating. Veterans who had destroyed hundreds of Soviet tanks on the Eastern Front found themselves afraid of a weapon that seemed almost supernatural in its ability to appear, kill, and vanish before effective response was possible." Interrogation reports from POWs captured during the Ardennes fighting revealed repeated references to ghost tanks and devil machines that could strike from anywhere and couldn't be caught or killed. Lieutenant Hans Weber, a Tiger commander captured near Mannheim on December 24, provided testimony that illustrated the psychological transformation. "On the Eastern Front, we feared Soviet numbers but never doubted our superiority in individual combat. In the Ardennes, we feared the American Hellcats because they fought in ways we couldn't counter. They were always faster, always behind us, always gone before we could respond. Courage means nothing when your enemy can kill you and you cannot kill him. We began avoiding combat, seeking survival rather than victory. That is not how German panzer troops are supposed to fight, but it is what the Americans forced us to become." The transformation of American tank destroyer doctrine was equally dramatic. Field commanders like Walsh, Henderson, and Cummings had independently developed tactics that headquarters planners hadn't imagined. By December 20, after-action reports from multiple engagements reached 1st Army headquarters, where staff officers began recognizing patterns. Brigadier General Truman Bodino, commanding Combat Command B of the 7th Armored Division, synthesized the tactical lessons in a memorandum dated December 23, 1944. M18 tank destroyer battalions have demonstrated revolutionary capabilities against German heavy armor. Key factors: maximum exploitation of speed advantage, refusal of frontal engagement, focus on flank and rear armor vulnerabilities, rapid displacement preventing German counterfire, and psychological impact of appearing invincible through mobility. Recommend immediate dissemination of successful tactics to all tank destroyer units. December 23, 1944. The village of Mannheim represented a critical crossroads in the northern sector of the Ardennes battlefield. Control of Mannheim meant control of the road network connecting German spearheads to their supply bases. Lose Mannheim, and the German offensive would lose momentum it could never regain. General Feldmarschall Walter Model, commanding Army Group B, understood the strategic calculus. His operational directive dated December 22 stated, "Mannheim must be taken by December 24 regardless of cost. Commit all available armor reserves. The American lines must be broken before their reinforcements arrive. This is our final opportunity for decisive victory in the West." Model committed the 2nd SS Panzer Division to the attack, reinforced by the remnants of 3 heavy panzer battalions, collectively fielding 41 Tiger I tanks, the largest concentration of German heavy armor employed in a single engagement during the Ardennes offensive. German intelligence estimated American defensive forces at Mannheim included elements of the 7th Armored Division and the 82nd Airborne Division, but critically underestimated American tank destroyer strength in the sector. The German attack plan called for a night assault beginning at 0200 hours on December 24. Darkness would negate American artillery observation and, German planners hoped, reduce the effectiveness of American tank destroyers by limiting visibility for their high-speed maneuvers. What German intelligence had failed to detect was the arrival of the 628th Tank Destroyer Battalion, equipped with 36 M18 Hellcats, which had completed a forced march of 87 miles in 14 hours to reinforce Manhei's defenses. The battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel George Rubel, had studied reports of successful M18 engagements earlier in the offensive and developed a tactical plan specifically designed to exploit German expectations. Rubel's operations order, preserved in the National Archives, demonstrated sophisticated understanding of psychological warfare. Enemy expects tank destroyers to employ defensive ambush tactics. Enemy further expects reduced American effectiveness during night operations. We will attack German armor during their assault, using their own offensive momentum against them. M18 platoons will position in depth, allowing German forces to penetrate initial defensive lines. Once enemy commits to attack, we will attack their flanks and rear simultaneously from multiple directions. Darkness limits their ability to track our movements. Their numerical superiority becomes a liability when they cannot identify targets or coordinate defensive responses. At 0203 hours on December 24, 41 German Tigers and approximately 60 Panzer IV medium tanks began their assault on Manhei. The advance proceeded with typical German precision, infantry clearing suspected defensive positions, armor advancing in coordinated bounds, artillery fires suppressing expected American strong points. By 0245 hours, German forces had penetrated 1,200 meters into American defensive positions, destroying several American outposts and capturing key terrain. Radio intercepts indicated German commanders believed the attack was succeeding. Oberst Hans Johann, commanding the Armored Task Force, transmitted at 0251 hours, initial objectives secured. American resistance lighter than expected. Continuing advance toward Manhei Center. What Johann didn't realize was that American infantry had withdrawn according to plan, allowing German armor to advance into a carefully prepared kill zone. At 0257 hours, Rubel gave the order his battalion had been waiting for: all companies, commence attack. Execute swarm protocol. 36 M18 Hellcats attacked simultaneously from 4 different directions. The Germans, concentrated in Manhei's confined street network, found themselves in the worst possible tactical situation: heavy armor trapped in restricted terrain, attacked from multiple axes, in darkness that prevented effective coordination. The engagement that followed was chaos documented through radio transcripts, after-action reports, and post-battle investigation. German tanks, unable to maneuver in confined streets, attempted to establish defensive positions. But the M18s, attacking from different directions simultaneously, created a situation where any German tank rotating to face one threat exposed itself to fire from another direction. Staff Sergeant Leonard Goodman, commanding an M18 in Company B, described the engagement in his combat interview conducted December 28. We came in from the northeast at about 35 miles per hour, headlights off, navigating by moonlight. The Germans were all bunched up in the streets, perfect targets. We'd fire 2 or 3 rounds, then reverse course at full speed before they could return fire. The darkness was our friend. They couldn't see us well enough to track us, but we could see their muzzle flashes and silhouettes. It was like shooting fish in a barrel, except the fish had 88mm guns and could kill you if you made one mistake. The German response revealed complete tactical breakdown. Johann's radio transmissions, intercepted by American signals intelligence, documented disintegration of command control, 0302 hours, under attack from multiple directions. Casualties mounting. Request flare illumination. 0309 hours, cannot identify enemy positions. Own vehicles firing on each other. Require immediate support. 0317 hours, have lost contact with 2nd Battalion. Estimate 15 to 20 tanks destroyed. Situation critical. 0324 hours, cannot maintain position. Authorizing general withdrawal. The Battle of the Bulge concluded 79 years ago, but its lessons continue shaping military doctrine and strategic thinking. The M18 Hellcat's performance during that battle represents one of warfare's clearest demonstrations that tactical innovation can overcome technological superiority, that mobility can defeat armor, and that adaptability determines victory more reliably than raw power. Modern military analysis, conducted by institutions like the U.S. Army War College and RAND Corporation, continues examining the Ardennes fighting for insights applicable to contemporary warfare. A 2018 study titled Mobility versus Protection: Lessons from the Ardennes Offensive concluded, the M18 Hellcat's success against German heavy armor validates doctrines emphasizing maneuverability and tactical flexibility over static defensive capabilities. Contemporary parallels exist in conflicts where lighter, more mobile forces defeat heavier opponents through superior tactics and exploitation of mobility advantages. The human dimension remains central to understanding the battle's significance. The M18 crews who developed revolutionary tactics during desperate defensive fighting were predominantly young men, average age 23, with limited combat experience. They succeeded not through superior training or equipment, but through willingness to abandon doctrine and innovate under fire. This suggests that military effectiveness depends less on technological superiority than on cultural factors that encourage tactical flexibility and reward innovation. The German failure in the Ardennes stemmed partly from opposite cultural factors. German military culture emphasized doctrinal precision, technical excellence, and adherence to established procedures. These factors had produced spectacular victories earlier in the war, but by 1944 had become liabilities. German commanders struggled to adapt when enemies refused to fight according to German doctrinal expectations. The Tiger crews who died in the Ardennes were victims not of inferior equipment but of inflexible doctrine that couldn't accommodate revolutionary enemy tactics. The strategic implications extended beyond the Ardennes. Germany's failure to achieve breakthrough in Belgium ended any possibility of negotiated peace in the West, committed German reserves that could have defended against Soviet offensives in the East, and accelerated Allied advance into Germany. The M18 battalion's contribution to this strategic outcome, while impossible to quantify precisely, was significant. By destroying German heavy armor that would otherwise have required costly infantry assaults to eliminate, the Hellcats accelerated German defensive collapse and reduced American casualties. Contemporary warfare continues validating principles demonstrated in the Ardennes. Conflicts in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Ukraine have shown that mobility and tactical flexibility often prove more valuable than heavy armor protection. Modern military procurement increasingly emphasizes platforms that can rapidly adapt to changing tactical situations rather than specialized weapons optimized for specific scenarios. This represents direct lineage from lessons learned when M18 Hellcats defeated Tiger tanks through speed and innovative tactics. The Ardennes battlefield today preserves memories of those desperate winter weeks. The Belgian government maintains extensive historical sites, including preserved defensive positions, museums displaying recovered equipment, and memorials honoring both American and German soldiers who fought there. Annual commemorations draw veterans' descendants, military historians, and visitors seeking to understand how the battle unfolded. Several M18 Hellcats survive in museums worldwide, maintained as tributes to the crews who fought in them and the tactical revolution they represented. The most famous, nicknamed Hellcat and preserved at the National World War II Museum in New Orleans, carries kill markings indicating 12 German tanks destroyed during the Ardennes fighting. Standing beside this vehicle, visitors can imagine the courage required to face 60-ton Tigers in a vehicle whose armor could be penetrated by heavy machine gun fire, trusting that speed and tactics would overcome the terrible disparity in protection and firepower. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.